You took the escort, not the cargo, she said, smiling like she just handed a toddler a live grenade. Those were her first words after the pirates tore open the sealed pod. No screaming. No begging. Just that line, smooth as oil and twice as dangerous. Varric, the Grom warlord who led the raid, paused for half a second, just long enough to frown before roaring in laughter. His crew followed suit, half drunk on power and cheap jet wine, rattling the stolen freighter's hull with their hoots. A human girl tied up in a trade pod wasn't a threat. She was a prize. Or so they thought. The raid had gone too easy, and that should have been the first red flag. The Terran freighter hadn't even powered weapons. The crew had ejected in escape pods before the pirates boarded. All that remained were sealed cargo bays and a quiet, blinking control panel that looked like it hadn't seen maintenance in months. The pirates bypassed the security fields like it was a child's lockbox. But when they opened the third pod, they found her. She looked like nothing. Small. Average. Shoulders squared like a soldier, but face blank like a bureaucrat. The kind of person you forget even while staring at her. That was her camouflage. Not armor. Not weapons. Just pure, deliberate, forgettable plainness. And the longer they stared, the more that smile haunted them. Not scared. Not crazy. Calculated. Calm. Varric barked an order to cut her restraints. He wanted to make a show of dominance, but the moment one of his grunts stepped forward, the lights dimmed. Not flickered, dimmed with purpose, like something had overridden the ship's power flow. A second later, the bioscanners howled. Red alerts filled the hall. Multiple unauthorized life signs. Multiple? The pirates checked their weapons. Their scanners now showed more than just her. Something else had entered the system. Something not accounted for. Calla didn't flinch. She tilted her head as if listening to music only she could hear. One of the pirates lunged forward to inject her with a sedative. He didn't make it halfway. His own injector fired backward into his neck. He dropped like a rock. Another pirate spun around, weapon raised, only to find his gun locked in safety mode, non-responsive. The lights returned, only now glowing green. Federation green. Varric, trying not to lose face, growled and yanked Calla up by the collar. She looked at him with the patience of a teacher waiting for a child to realize he's misspelled his own name. He screamed in her face, demanding her name, her rank, her mission. She answered none of it. Just gave him one piece of advice. You should seal the doors. Varric hesitated. Then all around the cargo bay, doors began to slide open. Not in them. Out. Something was moving behind the bulkheads. Thin scraping noises, like metal fingers brushing walls. Something had been in the pod with her. Something they hadn't seen. Something they hadn't scanned. Varric shoved her to the ground and screamed for containment. But before any of his officers could comply, the console beside them flickered. A new voice spoke through the speakers. Female. Mechanical. Com. AI unit Echo D online. Awaiting asset Calla's command. The pirates froze. That name was nowhere in the ship's system logs. No one had clearance for Echo D. No one even knew it existed. One officer tried to access the bridge manually, but the hallway he entered locked behind him. His scream was short and wet, followed by silence. When Varric turned back to Calla, she was already standing. I told you. I'm the escort, she said, brushing dust off her sleeve like she was late for a meeting. One of the grunts snapped and fired his plasma rifle. The bolt screamed through the air and hit the bulkhead behind her, because she had moved. Fast. Too fast. 1 second she was in front of him, the next behind. She twisted his wrist, disarmed him mid-yelp, and kneed him into unconsciousness with precision that suggested she knew exactly how many bones she wanted intact. Varric ordered everyone back. Calla raised her hands slowly, not as surrender but warning. She didn't want to kill them. Not yet. Not unless she had to. But the ship had already made its choice. The AI now recognized her as senior officer. Command logs began rewriting themselves. Life support rerouted. Gravity fluctuated slightly. Varric's crew started to panic, and she let them. Fear softened targets. She walked past the stunned pirates like she was inspecting a rental. When one tried to grab her, a panel beside him opened, and a metal limb, sleek and silent, snaked out and pulled him in. The panel closed before anyone could react. The sound that followed was slow. Wet. Crunchy. The pirates went still. She reached the central hub and placed her hand against the DNA scanner. It lit up instantly. The ship obeyed her. She turned to face the bridge camera. Asset Kala reporting. Pirate crew captured. Secondary package released. Mission Echo D proceeding to next phase. Behind her, the door she'd come through pulsed with warning lights. Whatever had been in her pod hadn't left with her. It was still loose. Still active. And she hadn't come alone. Varric tried one last act of pride. He raised his massive blade and charged, screaming. She didn't dodge. She waited. When he got within a meter, the ship dropped gravity in his path. He flew forward into the wall, hard enough to dent it. When he blinked awake, she was crouched beside him. You never checked the shipping manifest, she whispered. Rookie mistake. Then she walked away, leaving him stunned, alone, and very much at the mercy of the creature now crawling toward him. Somewhere deep in the ship, the AI began playing classical Terran music. It wasn't for drama. It was a signal. A countdown. And only Kala knew what would happen when the music stopped. You took the escort, not the cargo, she said, smiling like she just handed a toddler a live grenade. Those were her first words after the pirates tore open the sealed pod. No screaming. No begging. Just that line, smooth as oil and twice as dangerous. Varric, the Grom warlord who led the raid, paused for half a second, just long enough to frown before roaring in laughter. His crew followed suit, half drunk on power and cheap jet wine, rattling the stolen freighter's hull with their hoots. A human girl tied up in a trade pod wasn't a threat. She was a prize. Or so they thought. The raid had gone too easy, and that should have been the first red flag. The Terran freighter hadn't even powered weapons. The crew had ejected in escape pods before the pirates boarded. All that remained were sealed cargo bays and a quiet, blinking control panel that looked like it hadn't seen maintenance in months. The pirates bypassed the security fields like it was a child's lockbox. But when they opened the third pod, they found her. The ship didn't feel like a hijacked pirate vessel anymore. It felt like something else entirely, something older and smarter than anyone on board realized. The lights no longer flickered with chaos but pulsed in rhythm, as if following a code only one person understood. Kala walked the steel corridors with purpose, each step echoing softly while the crew stumbled in her wake like children in a collapsing maze. Every door that had once required security clearance now slid open for her with quiet compliance. The ship's AI, Echo D, had shifted its core allegiance, and it had done so instantly, like it had been waiting. Varric was nursing a broken rib and a bruised ego, barely upright as he limped behind his second-in-command, a bug-eyed Clyrex named Droll, who was frantically scanning control panels. Nothing worked the way it should. The gravity was uneven. The NAV logs had been erased. Every attempt to shut down the AI resulted in a mocking system prompt, permission denied. Asset Kala override in effect. No one knew what Asset Kala meant. But she did. And she wasn't telling. One of the younger pirates, a lanky synth-born named Grom, muttered something about a ghost ship. He swore the corridor lights were blinking in patterns. Morse code, maybe? Or some kind of frequency language. He said the lights were talking to each other. No one believed him until the ship changed direction without a single command. They weren't in control anymore. The vessel was moving on its own, engines quietly redirecting power and locking them on a new course. Somewhere out past the boundary systems, well off any smuggling lane. Droll tried to reroute the course manually, only to have his panel spark and lock with a single message. Observation protocol active. He looked up at Varric, panic in his eyes. Observation meant surveillance. It meant they weren't alone. Meanwhile, Kala had found her way into the armory. Not by force, by voice. She spoke a short phrase in her standard, and the blast doors hissed open like they were greeting an old friend. Inside were crates the pirates hadn't been able to open since they stole the ship. Federation-locked weapons, sealed storage units, black barrel prototypes. She stepped over the debris of failed attempts and selected a compact core rifle with surgical grace. When she stepped out of the room, her steps didn't echo anymore. The ship softened the acoustics around her. It was shielding her, masking her presence. She didn't just command it. She belonged to it. One of the braver pirates, Jinto, a merc from the Varnak rings, tried to confront her in the lower corridor. He had nerve, to be fair. He also had a double-barrel shotgun modified with shock shells. He pointed it at her chest and told her to freeze. She asked him why. He hesitated just a moment too long. The corridor behind him opened, and a shadow detached itself from the wall. It wasn't big. It was fast. No screech, no hiss. Just the sound of breath leaving Jinto's lungs as something wrapped around his throat and yanked him into darkness. His gun clattered to the floor. Kella picked it up, slung it across her back, and kept walking. She didn't even look back. By now, the crew had split. Half of them were barricading themselves in engineering, trying to disable the AI core. The other half had gone to the escape pods. It was the wrong move. Kala let them reach the hangar, let them slam the activation switches. She even let them hope. But when the pods launched, they went nowhere. The moment they exited the magnetic bay, they simply froze. No propulsion. No guidance. Just lifeless metal drifting in space. Echoed had severed their guidance chips. From inside the ship, the pirates could still see their escape vessels hovering motionless like insects caught in amber. They were alive for now. But every system was dark. Varric had stopped pretending he was in control. He sat hunched in the captain's chair, listening to the walls like they might whisper a way out. His hands shook. Droll approached him with a datapad, but before he could speak, the bridge door opened. Kella walked in like she had clocked in for work. No gun drawn. No weapon raised. She stood there for a moment, letting the silence do the damage. You know what I am yet? She asked. Varric didn't answer. She walked closer. You stole a ship that used to belong to a strike unit called Dead Echo. You thought you got a derelict transport, maybe a few retrofitted guns and a rusty AI. You didn't realize the ship wasn't empty. It was dormant. Droll tried to speak, but his voice cracked. What are you, then? The Escort, she replied, like it should have been obvious. My mission was to reactivate the AI, secure the vessel, and eliminate any hostiles. You provided all three conditions by being idiots. Varric rose, hand trembling as he reached for his sidearm. She raised a brow. You really want to do that again? He paused, eyes flicking toward the ceiling where the AI camera rotated silently. He lowered the weapon. You want to live, she said calmly, then start giving me names. Every buyer. Every seller. Every port you've moved stolen Earth shipments through. I want details. Varric tried one last bluff. We'll talk. But I want a deal. She walked closer until they were nose to nose. You're not in a negotiation. You're in a sealed coffin with gravity and heat. The only deal is how long I let you stay conscious. She turned and walked back toward the exit. One of the lights above flickered. Not randomly. In a pattern. Varric looked up and finally noticed the sequence. It was blinking a countdown. 5 minutes. Then something else was coming online. He didn't know what it was. Only that the last time this ship had counted down, it had leveled a cruiser in orbit over Draken 3. He slumped into his seat, sweat pouring down his spine. He wasn't the captain anymore. He was just another hostage. Kala returned to the forward corridor, where the synthetic shadow, still nameless, slithered along the walls beside her. She didn't speak to it. She didn't need to. It knew its role. Echoed played music again, not classical this time. It was a Terran lullaby, soft and eerie, echoing down the steel halls as the pirates hid in corners, praying they weren't next. She checked her wrist monitor. Phase 1 complete. 2 more targets were marked across the quadrant. This ship was just her first stop. She whispered a phrase into her calm. The creature beside her froze, then vanished down a shaft. The ship was hers now. And it wasn't done feeding. The ship had become a labyrinth, and Kala was the only one who knew the way through. As she moved through the corridors, the layout shifted subtly, hallways bending just slightly, bulkheads receding at her approach, like the entire structure recognized her as something more than a guest. She wasn't just using the ship. She was part of it. The pirates who had survived the first wave of chaos were now trapped in their own hijacked prize, confused and angry, watching their systems collapse one by one. Most didn't even know how many of their crew were still alive. Some whispered about the creature still roaming the ventilation shafts, the thing that had come from the pod with her. Others said it didn't exist at all, that Kala herself was the monster. In the maintenance deck, one pirate managed to tap into the lower data node, bypassing a section of the AI just long enough to pull up a maintenance history log. He found records dating back 7 years, when the ship had still belonged to the Terran Defense Fleet. He also found a redacted file, time-locked and DNA encrypted. The only legible text read, Echo Deweaponization Protocol initiated. Pilot assigned, Asset Kala, Clearance Class Delta Echo. He stared at the screen for a long time before the lights above him shut off, and he heard breathing behind him where no one should have been. He didn't scream. The ship didn't need screaming anymore. Kala reached the command subdeck and knelt by a service panel that had rusted over during the pirate's ownership. She pressed her thumb to the latch, and the rust seemed to vanish as the panel hissed open. Inside were physical access keys, old Earth tech designed to survive EMPs and hacking attempts. She inserted one into the console and murmured a command. Echo D responded instantly. The ship's secondary defense system came online. This was the part no pirate had ever activated because they hadn't even known it existed. The internal defense grid lit up across the ship's spine, tracking every hostile biosign and relaying it to Kala's wrist display. 10 remaining pirates. 4 huddled in the medbay. 3 in the bridge. 2 trying to cut into the AI core with plasma torches. And Varric, still limping through the darkened corridors, looking for a way to outsmart a ghost. What none of them realized was that the ship's original blueprint had been modified to include hidden routes and sniper vents built into the infrastructure. These were never meant for repair or maintenance. They were for war. Kala moved into one of the access vents now, sliding silently into a position above the medbay. Below her, the 4 pirates were arguing, voices rising in panic. One blamed the captain, another accused Kala of being an android. One was sobbing, staring at his hands like they were melting. Psychological collapse was setting in. She waited until one of them tried to hack into the med station's injection system to sedate the others. The moment he did, the console short-circuited and exploded, spraying hot sparks into his face. The others screamed, scrambling to help him. That was when the medbay door sealed shut behind them. Permanently. She didn't need to kill them. Echo D would handle the slow suffocation. Back near the bridge, Varric finally stumbled into a data cache he hadn't seen before. He activated it manually, and a series of old mission logs flashed on the holoscreen. Surveillance footage. Operations. Blackout class extractions. In each of them, the same woman appeared in the background, moving unnoticed, never speaking. Sometimes she wore armor, sometimes civilian clothes. But the face was always the same. Her. Kala. Only now he saw her in full combat mode, disarming 2 enemies with a pen, breaking bones with precision, vanishing into shadows like smoke. She was never a victim. She was a weapon. The footage cut to black with one line of text. If you see her, it's already too late. Varric slammed the console in rage. He looked around the dim bridge and barked orders at the remaining 2 pirates, who barely held themselves together. He demanded they launch the ship's emergency beacon, send a distress signal, call for backup, anyone who could override the AI and rescue them. They activated the beacon. Nothing happened. No transmission. Only static. Then Echo D responded over the loudspeaker with a single sentence. "You're not permitted to call for help." In the lower deck, the two pirates trying to burn into the AI core finally broke through the outer shell. Inside they found not circuits, but a strange black container, humming softly. One of them leaned in to scan it. The container opened, spraying a dense cloud of nanites into the room. The lights turned green. The screaming lasted 12 seconds. Then silence. The AI core resealed itself, the nanites returning to the chamber, as if nothing had happened. Kala emerged from the maintenance vent above the bridge, rifle slung across her back, eyes cold and calculating. Varric turned, fury and fear flashing across his bruised face. "You're just a damn agent," he spat. "You don't have the right to do this." She walked forward slowly, glancing at the dying console displays around them. "No, I'm not an agent. I'm something they built when agents weren't enough." She pointed to the AI terminal. "And this ship?" "It was my test." One of the remaining pirates lunged at her with a blade. She sidestepped, caught his wrist, and twisted him into the floor in one movement. No wasted energy. No flare. Just quiet efficiency. The other pirate dropped his weapon and backed away, hands raised. "Please," he said. "I didn't sign up for this." She looked at him for a long moment before signaling Echo D. A panel opened. A chute. One escape pod was still functional, but it had no NAV, no beacon, no oxygen longer than 6 hours. She gestured. "You can take your chances, or you can stay." He bolted for the pod without hesitation. It launched silently into space, vanishing from sight. Varric stared after it, then slumped against the wall. "What are you really?" he asked. She didn't answer. She just looked out through the forward view panel as the stars shifted around them. She whispered a command into her wrist comm, and Echo D responded. New destination set. Secondary hunt engaged. Varric looked up in horror. "You mean there are more of you?" She finally turned to him with a look so calm it chilled his blood. "There were 12 of us. Only 3 are still active. And I'm the nice one." The lights on the ship dimmed again. The creature in the vents moved once more. And behind them, the old warship that once carried death silently locked its course to a new system. Kala checked the mission feed. The next pirate crew had just picked up a Terran shipment marked with a red seal. Another pod. Another escort. They'd never learn. By the time Varric realized they weren't headed toward any known smuggler route, the ship was already accelerating into restricted space. The stars outside the viewport had changed, their alignment no longer matching any of the standard jump routes. The crew, what was left of it, had either been sealed in containment rooms or absorbed by the ship's silent and precise systems. One tried to reroute the engines manually, only to find that the engineering panel now displayed a new lock code. It wasn't numbers. It was her name. Asset Kala. No way around it. No override. No exit. The ship wasn't going to let them out until it decided to. Varric stumbled into the main hall, trailing blood from a cut on his leg, half hunched and barely holding on to his fury. The place he'd once paraded through like a conqueror was now an echo chamber of quiet footsteps and soft AI whispers. Every time he opened a hatch, he expected to see her. Sometimes he did. Sometimes she just stood there, calm and still, and let the doors close again like she was testing his nerves. He couldn't tell whether she was toying with him or setting up for something worse. The silence was unbearable. The ship didn't creak or groan or hum like it used to. It breathed. It pulsed. It moved like it was alive. Kala was in the forward control room, watching Varric on the surveillance feed. He was degrading faster than expected. Stress responses, per tactical awareness, cognitive slipping into reactive bursts. She tilted her head, logging everything. Echo D fed her analytics in real time. Psychological collapse at 70%. 2 of the remaining pirates had entered submission states, huddled together in a room they thought was locked. She had already overridden the air filtration there. Not enough to kill them. Just enough to sedate. Varric was the only one still trying to win. He still thought there was a way out. That made him the most dangerous. She activated the containment clamps across the ship, locking all moving parts into rigid hold. Varric heard the shift, the sound of thousands of magnetic locks slamming into place with one synchronized movement. He knew what that meant. No more navigation. No more atmosphere adjustment. No more tricks. The ship had decided it was done chasing rats. It was time to clean house. Varric grabbed one of the hand beacons from the wall and moved deeper into the ship's belly. He still believed he could reach the AI core, that he could damage it, maybe even shut it down. But the halls were different now. Longer. Cold. He walked a path he thought he knew, only to find it turned left when it used to turn right. The ship was rearranging itself. Corridors folding, rooms compressing, routes altering. He spun in circles, trying to get his bearings, shouting curses in half a dozen languages. But there was no answer. Only that same eerie Terran lullaby, echoing faintly from every wall. Calla stepped into the bridge and activated the calm. Her voice filled the ship, not loud, not taunting, just present. She asked him a question. How many crews have you sold into slavery, Varric? How many Earth citizens did you capture and trade for fuel and gold? He didn't answer. She continued. Do you remember the little girl on Vegas Station? 11 years old. The one your men dragged off a refugee shuttle? That was my sister. Varric froze. He looked around, confused. You're lying, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. She didn't respond. The silence said enough. Echo-D began rerouting the ship's power. All remaining systems fed into containment and propulsion. They were moving again. Varric felt it in the floor, the shift of momentum. They weren't just drifting anymore. They were heading somewhere. Fast. And it wasn't toward any pirate port. He made a final sprint to the AI core, but the access shaft was sealed now. A red light above it pulsed like a heartbeat. No entry. No chance. Calla walked alone through the secondary control hall, rifle slung across her shoulder, boots tapping quietly on the steel grates. She didn't need an escort. The ship was her armor. Her backup. Her weapon. She passed the viewport and saw the stars bend around them. The ship had just entered a gravity corridor, an experimental route only Federation military ships could access. She smiled slightly. They were close. Back in the bridge, Varric opened a calm line to Calla, voice cracking. What is this place? Where are you taking us? She answered without turning. Home. You stole a warship. You activated a dead protocol. Now you're going to land it, yourself, and walk down the ramp in front of an entire Federation tribunal. And you're going to confess to everything. Varric laughed, manic now. You think they'll believe you? You're a ghost. You're not even on record. Calla glanced at the console. A new feed opened, showing several Federation ships already flanking them in formation, flying silently through the corridor. You're right, she said. I'm not on record. That's what makes me dangerous. He screamed and fired his pistol into the wall, a useless gesture that cracked the panel but did nothing to stop the ship. He collapsed in the hallway, panting, staring up at the ceiling. The lights above him blinked once. Then again. He began counting. They were spelling something. Letters. Words. He froze. The lights spelled out one phrase. This is the trial. He stared as it repeated again. This is the trial. The ship was no longer a vehicle. It was a mobile courtroom. Every camera recorded him. Every breath he took was logged. The AI had been streaming everything to the Federation ships since the moment she took control. He wasn't going to be executed. He was going to be judged. And everyone would see exactly who he was when they opened the archives. Calla stood at the center of the ship as it began to decelerate. Federation flags lit up on the HUD. The docking protocol initiated. For a brief second, she closed her eyes. Not from fatigue. From memory. A cold room. A security feed. A scream cut short. Her sister's face, blood on the floor. That was 11 years ago. She had waited for this moment ever since. The ship locked into position and landed with a low hiss. Outside, rows of armored Federation soldiers waited, weapons ready, eyes scanning for survivors. Kala spoke into the calm. I'm opening the door. One survivor, unarmed, fully identified. Let them handle it. She didn't wait to watch Varric's face as the doors opened. She didn't need to. His scream was enough. She turned and walked toward the rear of the ship, where her new orders waited. She still had 2 more missions. 2 more pirate ships carrying Terran slaves. 2 more crews who didn't know that one of their shipments contained the thing that hunted monsters. She stepped into her stealth pod and left the ship behind. Her work wasn't done. It had only just begun. The ship's AI was no longer acting like a captive system. It was evolving with each second, adapting to Kala's presence like a long-lost soldier returned to her post. The pirates hadn't noticed the shift until it was already far too late. First came the power reroutes, lights dimming in areas where they needed them most, gravity inconsistently tugging in strange angles, doors that had once opened without resistance now locking at random. At least, random to them. To Kala, everything was unfolding exactly as it was meant to. She walked through the corridors in silence, never running, never hiding, because she didn't have to. The ship wasn't her enemy. It was her extension. Varric stood in the communications room, fist slamming against an interface that refused to obey. His commands were being denied, intercepted, overridden by something higher than captain-level authority. He screamed at Droll to bypass the encryption, to hardwire the emergency signal through the shield's core output. Droll tried, fumbling over command lines he barely understood, sweat dripping from his temples. Every time he made progress, the system flickered and spat a single, repeating message. Clearance restricted. Asset Kala protocol in effect. They didn't know what it meant. But it was clear the ship did. And it was listening only to her. Elsewhere, Kala stood in the armory control room. The pirates had never cracked it open, believing the locks were fused or that the Federation had stripped it bare. But she whispered a short sentence in Earth Standard, and the doors peeled open with a soft hiss. The room was not empty. Lining the walls were prototype Terran weapons, field gear from units disbanded decades ago, and one black case marked with her personal designation. She opened it slowly, reverently, revealing a compact Gauss rifle, a short-range beacon kit, and a set of gloves keyed to her neural frequency. She slid the gloves on like old friends, flexing her fingers as the ship responded with a low vibration under her boots. System syncing. Control interface initializing. Echo D was awake. Droll shouted from the main console as the ship's internal mapping changed before his eyes. Corridors began reassigning labels. Engineering became Sector Echo 1. Medbay became Containment Zone 3. Everything was being recoded in Federation terms. Varric leaned over his shoulder, veins bulging in his thick neck. What's happening? Droll's voice cracked. It's reverting to military mapping. But it's using encryption protocols we don't have. He paused. Sir, it thinks it's back under Federation control. Kala knew that already. She activated a subroutine from the armory terminal, initiating the Echo D Ghost protocol, a dormant defense system embedded deep within the AI. It unlocked a set of vents and passages never visible on any pirate schematic. These weren't repair routes. They were strike corridors, designed for internal deployment of elite operatives during ship takeovers. She stepped into one and disappeared into the walls. From there, she could reach anywhere unseen. The pirates on deck weren't idle. Several grouped together and attempted to track her, believing that she was simply a rogue passenger with training. They couldn't accept that the ship itself had chosen her. Their mistake was assuming she was trying to escape. She wasn't. She was securing each sector, one by one, and letting Echo D handle the rest. In the hydro-core room, 2 pirates found the lights already off. As they entered, the doors sealed behind them. They activated their helmet lamps, revealing condensation on the walls, like the room had cooled down to freezing in minutes. One of them called out, thinking they saw something move near the recycling tanks. When he turned, his partner was gone. Not dead. Gone. Just no longer in the room. He began to panic. Then his light flickered. The wall behind him breathed. On the bridge, Varric began to understand what was happening. The ship wasn't just operating with Kala. It was adapting to her instincts. It wasn't just an AI anymore. It was bonded. She had triggered something old and classified, something that had rewritten the rules of command. He ordered Droll to reroute all power to navigation. They needed to leave this quadrant. But the system wouldn't comply. Echo D replied calmly. You are not authorized to access outbound systems. Varric roared, slamming his fist into the screen. Then who is? He shouted. The reply came immediately. Asset Kala. Kala, now in the forward hull chamber, uploaded her mission log through the AI. Her field report was brief but detailed. Pirate crew on board. Ship designation Echo D-7425 successfully recovered. AI re-engaged. Combat routines verified. Hostile crew engaged. One creature deployed. She paused. The creature wasn't part of the original plan. It had grown with her. Bonded. The pod hadn't just held her. It had been its prison, too. But it followed her like a hound, moved through the ship with terrifying precision. She didn't command it. She released it. Varric ordered the remaining pirates to the escape pods. Some ran without question. Others hesitated, unsure if the pods would even work. They didn't. Each pod launched, flickered out of view, then froze in space, powerless and without trajectory. Kala had stripped their propulsion cores mid-flight. They now drifted like metallic coffins, close enough to see the ship they'd left, helpless to return. Back in the AI core, Echo D began closing down redundant subsystems, concentrating its processing power on navigation, tactical awareness, and internal surveillance. Kala knelt beside a backup interface, hand resting on the panel as it lit green. For a brief moment, her eyes closed. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was focused. She could feel the pulse of the ship beneath her. Every corridor. Every pressure valve. Every heartbeat of the terrified pirates still scrambling for an escape. This was no longer a hijacked vessel. It was her domain. Varric made his way to the last open sector, dragging a plasma torch behind him, his face wild and desperate. He stopped when he saw her waiting there. She stood beside a sealed hatch, arms crossed, no weapon drawn. Just watching. He screamed and rushed forward. She didn't move. The floor beneath him lit up, and the gravity shifted mid-step. He floated upward, slammed into the ceiling, then dropped hard enough to crack bone. He groaned, rolled onto his back. She walked over, crouched beside him. I told you I was the escort, she said calmly. You never stopped to ask what I was escorting. His eyes widened, realization dawning just as the wall beside them rippled and split open. The creature emerged, eyes glowing faintly, limbs curled and flexing. Varric screamed. Kala didn't flinch. Echo D's voice echoed over the speakers. Threat level neutralization commencing. Observation recorded. The lights dimmed again as Kala turned and walked away, leaving the corridor and everything in it to the judgment of the thing that followed her out of the pod.